Alright guys, what does it take to become a professional arm wrestler? That's a question that I'm going to focus on today. Dive into it a little bit, share with you kind of what I've learned, because if there's anything that is certain in this respect, it's that there is no linear direction to achieving this. It is a complex question that has a complex answer. You can simplify it and make it seem very straightforward. You can. But if you want to, it's endless. So what does it take to become a professional arm wrestler? Look, the first and the most simple answer would be to quote someone like Devin Larratt and just say to love the sport and never stop. That's the simplest formula there is. Loving the sport is implied. Without that, you're not going to make it. You're just not going to make it. You won't. And why won't you make it? Because you won't ultimately be willing to dedicate enough time. And that leads into Devin's second point: never stop. John Brzenk said, "Put 10,000 hours in." If we're talking in broad senses, in kind of typical motivational ideas, it's summed up pretty neatly there. Love arm wrestling and never stop. But if you want to dive deeper than that, if you want to get into the specifics of how do you do it, like what's going on, then keep listening. Because that's kind of where I wanted to go with this. I wanted to go a little deeper into what it takes. Arm wrestling, in my 9 years of being involved in the sport, I have been in a constant state of collecting data and feeling what on earth is going on in my body, and what I'm asking my body to be good at. Arm wrestling is a very bizarre set of conditions that you need to achieve. Your body's not really designed to arm wrestle. A lot of people break their arm wrestling because at the end of the day, it's not a direction of movement that is expected of our body. It's not a direction of movement that is in the original planes of simply up and down. We ask our elbows to be stable against the grain of the joint, and don't get me started on how much confusion there has been in the wider community. Just go and have a look at the comments section under any arm wrestling video that's gone viral, and you'll see comments of, hey, it's cheating. They're using their body. Not allowed to bend your wrist even. You see lots of comments like that. So it's very clear that straight away there is a fundamental lack of understanding of the biomechanics of what's going on in arm wrestling. But let's be clear. Arm wrestling is a joint-heavy sport. Muscular strength is one component to the sport. Joint integrity is another. Coordination and execution of tactics is another. And often the one I think that is most overlooked is the realization of the conditioning. I've often talked about the curse of strength. People like Larry Wheels, people who turn up to the sport incredibly strong already in a linear sort of fundamental sense. They do well against novices. They do well against low to mid-level amateurs. But as soon as they find someone that's been in the sport and has developed conditioning, they run into a problem. And that, for me, is kind of where I'm at. I started in the sport and I said to myself, look, I want to become the best arm wrestler I possibly can. I had an intuition of how to arm wrestle quite well. I did well in high school. I beat everyone in the army when I was serving. I always had good instincts, but I didn't know what it was to arm wrestle. So when I dedicated myself to unpacking and studying it, I straight away wanted to make sure I was putting my time, energy into the things that had the biggest reward. There's obviously broad theories like strength is never a weakness. To have stronger biceps, to have stronger pecs, stronger shoulders, it's never a weakness. But it can be a distraction. So I was actually very grateful to come to the sport in a weak condition. I was very grateful that I wasn't someone who felt the temptation or that alluring feeling of going where I think I'm strong. I wanted to first of all acknowledge that I wasn't strong and that I needed to first understand where to be strong. And I think all sports, when approached in a professional manner like that, will take a similar process. It'll be, first of all, experience the pathways, establish the basic coordination, establish an understanding of the ranges of movement that your body's going to go through, and start to apply light strength efforts on those things. And all too often, we miss those because we have the excitement of winning the moment in front of us, winning the moment against your buddy, your work colleague, your dad, whoever. And so we use just what we think is our best weapon, and it's often not the case. The best weapons in arm wrestling are the smallest things. Just be aware that a lot of people are going to dive into the which is more important, strength or technique. Okay. It's an endless cycle, that debate. It will go around and round. It will never end, and you can always argue on either side. The truth of the matter is that they both enhance each other. I think you can add a third thing to that: conditioning. Strength in a muscular sense, conditioning in a joint integrity sense, and technique. All of those factors will greatly amplify each other in terms of what they can do on the table. Technique amplifies strength, strength amplifies technique, technique amplifies conditioning, conditioning amplifies technique, conditioning amplifies strength, strength amplifies conditioning, and vice versa. I think I said them all there. Which one of those is the most important? I think, having experienced what I've experienced, is early days technique. Your first 3 years, absolutely technique. Search for technique so desperately. Never assume you've worked it out. Shadow box elites that move really well. Ask yourself constantly, why are they moving like this? Why are they posturing like that? Deliberately go into their postures, even if it feels tremendously weak for you. Even if you have an alternative position that is stronger, ignore your alternative position. Go where you're weak if it reflects movements that an elite arm wrestler does. And just feel it and experience it. All we're doing at this stage is trying to identify the coordination, the high level, the professional level coordination that athletes use, and just constantly allow your body to feel it and adapt, and ask yourself, why? Why do they go here? What are they achieving? Now, when you feel weak in those positions, I want you to persist, and I want you to learn to lose better. Just refine losing better as priority number one when it comes to your strength. What we don't want you to do is to develop strength in the wrong areas. Even though they may give you success right now against the guy across the table from you, I don't want you to work on those strengths. I want you to work on the strengths that matter in the long run. Because look, realistically, the guy across the table from you right now, you'll have him covered by next week if you're doing the little things and you're just waking up the efficiencies. So don't stress. Develop the strengths in the correct coordinations. Always search for more coordination. As you start to develop conditioning, as you start to develop strength, you're going to feel the reward of well-coordinated strength. This was the path that I I felt myself on. I focused on coordination, and I trusted that strength would develop in time. Now it did. It started to come. I had great success in my local and state and national levels. And for me, it was the interesting transition when I actually realized a new season was beginning, was when I went international for the first time. And I felt something different. I felt conditioning, or a lack of conditioning in my arm, and superior conditioning in my opponents. And what I mean by superior conditioning is stability. Well, like, to translate what conditioning actually does for you on the table, it is, first of all, stability. And stability is, oh my goodness, it's a powerful thing. Stability will mean that you can't be disengaged from your strength. If you are stable through your elbow, if you're stable through your wrist, you can use the complete chain. Whether it's on defense or offense, you can use the complete chain. Being disengaged from your elbow, being disengaged from your wrist, will mean you can no longer access the muscular strength you've developed. This is why we see people like Todd Hutchins beat people like Lachlan Adair decisively. Lachlan Adair is not lacking any strength. He's lacking conditioning relative to Todd. So when you start to get into the realm or the season or the phase of developing conditioning, and this is where I'm at right now. I'm 9 years in, and I'm focusing on conditioning, and I'm getting the most reward from increasing my conditioning. I believe I'm able to win the majority of my matches by disengaging my opponent, not by getting into a groove with them and having stronger muscular contractions. I don't like to get into muscular contractions unless I have to. I like to derail, whether it's inside or outside, up high or dragging low. Disengaging your opponent's chain creates an easier opportunity to have victory than fighting them in the trenches using your muscles against their muscles. This is something that will allow you to do very well in tournaments. This is something that will allow you to do very well in super matches against opponents that are stronger than you. This will change the game. Now, what seasons go beyond that, beyond conditioning? I don't exactly know. Like I said, I'm 9 years in. I am not at all, for one moment, thinking that I've worked this sport out. I think there's more to come. And I think that it's going to be a combination of the three, of technique and coordination, getting to advanced levels and understanding how you can use the strength you've grown and the conditioning you've developed better. How to utilize the full spectrum of styles. Of course, there are so many styles of arm wrestling. Developing the conditioning in all of those, developing the strength in all of those, developing a complete game, understanding when to create traps, when to lead the dance, when to force an issue, when to load, when to no load. There's a lot of things constantly floating around. At the end of the day, because arm wrestling is a sport against another athlete, it's not against an object. We have to be alive to the millions, or it's infinite. We have to be alive to the infinite possibilities of how the pressures could be. The pressures will change between every single match. They'll be familiar for some, incredibly unfamiliar for others. The more alive you are to that, the more advantages you will be able to seize in the match and take control of. So the season beyond coordination, strength, and conditioning is probably a season of mastery where you're just focusing on the complete package, putting everything together and trying to develop speed in your execution, speed in your thinking, being ahead of the game, being ahead of the curve, being better at thinking than your opponent, having higher table IQ than your opponent will reward you so much. Of course, always be strong. Always be strong and never give up on the pursuit of increasing strength or conditioning for that matter. But most of all, recognize that it's a continuous spiral down the rabbit hole when it comes to perfecting arm wrestling and truly making yourself the best arm wrestler you can be. Never stop chasing and never think that you've got it worked out.